Hi everyone, my name is Julie. This is Keep Calm with Books and Coffee. I talk about books on this channel, mainly books about magic. If you want to stick around for that, you can subscribe down below. Today, we're going to be going over all the things that I read in January. So January was a really great reading month for me. I read a lot of great books. I had a good time. I participated in TBRathon and I just kicked off my reading year in a great way. And I'm really excited about that. So we're also going to roll into just a few stats for the month before we start talking about the books. I read 10 books so far this month. One was a DNF'd and 2 are for a secret project that you will see coming in February. So keep your eyes peeled for that. In the end, I listened to 4 audiobooks, I read 3 ebooks, and then the DNF I tried both physically and on audio, and neither worked for me, so that's part of why it was a DNF. So we have 7 main things to talk about today and 1 DNF. This is a pretty good reading month for me, like I said, so let's jump right into it. Before I talk about my January reads, I want to mention one book that I finished after my December wrap-up was finished. I read Winter of the Witch at the very end of 2023. I actually finished this on New Year's Eve night at 9:30. It was the very last thing I read at the end of 2023 and I absolutely loved this. It's the 3rd book in the Winter Night trilogy and this whole series has really impressed me. It's a very folklorish story in which we're following Vasilisa from the time she's a young girl and into her adulthood, where she can see the old gods. She can see the traditional gods of Russia and communicates with them, but Christianity is sort of making its way across the land and sort of imposing some stricter ideas on people, especially rural people who have been following these old traditions for so long. But Vasilisa doesn't want to conform to that, and this is the trilogy is kind of her struggle against that, and also there's a bit of magic involved and some gods, and it's just incredible. I absolutely loved it, and I will be rereading this series at some point because I want to see even more than what I realized the first time, because I definitely, for each one of these books, I feel like I just rushed through to find out what was happening, and I want to see all of the little details going forward. Then we have our January reads, of course. So the first thing I read was Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. This is the first book in the Wayward Children series, and this was a reread for me. I love to kick off my reading year with a reread because it's both something that I know I'm going to like if I'm rereading a book that I love, I know I'm going to like it, and also it is a way to kind of get through that first book a little bit faster and take the pressure off for me of that first book of the year. So I usually pick a reread. For the past few years, it's been a Gail Carriger book, and this year I decided to reread Every Heart a Doorway. In this, we're following Eleanor West's home for wayward children, which at her home for wayward children, there are kids who have gone through portal worlds and come back to our world, and they are trying to adjust to coming back to a magicless world. And it's really interesting. I read this previously and liked it. I think I gave it a 3.5 the first time. Upon reread, I would probably bump that up to a 4. I was expecting to like this more on reread, both because I knew what was going on and I kind of had read a number of Seanan McGuire books since I read this, and I just sort of had a better idea of what to expect overall. That sort of helped me get through the chaos of this book, because there's a lot to figure out in this first book. It is both us learning a number of characters, because it's this home for children, so there's a bunch of characters, as well as a bunch of different portal worlds and alignments for the portal worlds, and then there's also a murder and a mystery going on. So in this tiny little book, there's a lot. So rereading was definitely the way to go for me for this, because I enjoyed it even more the second time, and I will be continuing on with the series. Next up is Silent Blade and Silver Shark, and I don't have a lot to say about really either of these, so I'm going to talk about them together. I read them as separate books, but they are in a bind up together as well, so I feel like they go together. These are by Ilona Andrews, and they're sci-fi romance novellas. So throughout these we're following two separate couples and seeing how they get together. They are set on other planets than Earth, and they are set far in the future, I think. The first one, Silent Blade, was not my favorite. I didn't love this one. It definitely felt very short, very like pared down to just the story, and I wanted a little more world building, a little more detail to it. And then Silver Shark was sort of the same way. With Silent Blade, I was just not won over by the hero like at all, so that one was okay for me. But in the second book, I really liked the characters and I really liked the idea. I actually just wanted this to be expanded on more, like so much more, because I really liked the idea of the world, and the Andrews have such an interesting and fascinating world building system, and I love the way they like build up their science and magic in their stories. So I was just constantly kind of wanting more from this one. So they both kind of hit the middle of the road for me. They weren't bad, I just saw a lot of potential in them, and also a lot of threads for things that the Andrews wrote later, or story ideas that I can see after reading so many of their books that were in these stories as well. So it was really interesting, but these were not my favorite things by Ilona Andrews by a long shot. So if you want a sneaky peek into what the books I am reading for my vlog are that I'm not going to tell you my thoughts on, one of them is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I read this in January, and I will be telling you all about it at the end of February, but that's a little sneak peek for you if you are interested. Then I continued my buddy read of the Crown of Shards trilogy. I read Protect the Prince, which is the second book. In this, we are following Everly, who is like, at the start of the book, she's like 17th in line to the throne. And then the Crown Princess orchestrates a massacre of all of her family, including her mother, so that she can become queen and not have any competition for the crown. But Everly manages to escape and joins a gladiator troupe, and through a series of events realizes that she has to come back to the palace and fight for the crown so that her cousin doesn't destroy the kingdom. That's the premise of the first book. We have a different focus in this book, and this has a bit of a stronger romance undertone to it. I wouldn't call any of this series a romantasy, but it is a fun fantasy with a undercurrent of romance in it. So that's not the main focus by any means, but that is a pretty strong subplot. I really love these books. This is also a reread, and a fun one at that. These books are just have a fun premise. They don't take themselves too seriously. I read them for what they are, and I just have a really good time with them. I like Everly as a character. She's a little bit older. She's in her late 20s during this, and I don't see a lot of characters at that age. I think she makes some mistakes. She makes some dumb choices sometimes, but she is also smart, and I'm seeing even more of her like planning and forethought in this reread. So I like these a lot, and I will definitely be moving on to the next series after we finish our reread. Next, I have Spectered Isle by KJ Charles. This book, I don't even know how to describe where this book, it's not a series. It's not quite a standalone, and it's not really a companion. So it's a confusing book. In this, we are following Saul, who is he was disgraced during the war, and he has come back home and can't find a job. So he works for an eccentric older collector man who believes in a lot of conspiracy theories. So he sends Saul on a mission to kind of check out a new conspiracy theory, and there he runs into Randolph, who the next time Saul is sent out on a mission, Randolph is also there. So they keep running into each other, and they seem to have some chemistry, but they also don't know why the other is showing up at all these like places. Eventually you find out that there is some magic involved, and Saul and Randolph kind of have to solve a problem going on here. I really liked this. I had a great time with it. I was feeling sort of mid about it and a little confused about it until we got the information that this is connected to one of KJ Charles's other books, which is the casebook of Simon Fexamall, which I love to pieces. I haven't talked about that book for a while now. It is a story of like kind of magic and power and romance. I would say that this is sort of a precursor to the Will Darling series, but with magic. Like, this isn't quite as skillfully pulled off as the Will Darling series, because I love that series so much, but this is something that has a lot of the same themes and elements and ideas around the characters and what they're struggling with, but not quite as nuanced. So I did enjoy this. I had a good time with it. I enjoyed it even more knowing that it's connected to that other book, but it was a fun time. Then we have The Hunting Moon by Susan Dennard, which is the second book in the Luminaries series. In the first book, we are following Winnie Wednesday, whose family was exiled from the Luminaries because of some of the actions of her father. He was consorting with the enemy, and therefore Winnie is trying to find a way back into becoming a luminary. Luminaries are hunters who go into the forest and destroy nightmares before they can come out of the forest and hurt humans. So Winnie figures out that there is no law saying that on her 16th birthday she can't go in and fight, like try to pass a trial to become a luminary even though she's exiled. So she uses this loophole to try and get her family back in the good graces. The second book follows up the events of the first, of course, so I can't really tell you what this is about, but we are dealing with the consequences of both what Winnie had to deal with previously as well as, of course, the events of the first book. And I just really loved how Dennard expanded on that. I think she did a great job, again, of kind of making these characters believable teens. They feel like they're making silly choices sometimes, but it's what you would believe teens would be doing. I really like Winnie's inner voice, and I love the way Dennard is building the story. I like the little nods to the Twitter adventure that we were on with Susan in 2020, and I just love this book. I'm predisposed to love these, and I just absolutely loved it. I do have to say I figured out things well before Winnie did, but that did not detract from my enjoyment of this, because I think it's just a well-crafted story and it's fun, and Dennard always takes me by surprise, which is like delightful and also heart-wrenching. Then the last book I finished was Spy Family Volume 1 by Tatsuya Endo, and this is a manga series that kicks off with a spy who has been assigned to a target, and he has to collect a family in order to get closer to his target. So he goes and adopts a daughter who turns out to be a psychic, and then he marries a woman who has secrets of her own, and the only person who knows everything that's going on is a little girl with psychic powers. And this is just hilarious and fun. I am going to be reading more of this in February because I absolutely want to get deeper into this. I just found it so hilariously adorable. Like, the characters all, you can tell, care about each other, and they all have their own little secrets, but we're also following this larger plot, and it's all sort of just fun. It was so fun, and I had a great time with it, so I'm definitely going to be continuing on with this. Then the last thing I want to mention is Kiss of Steel by Beck McMaster, and this was the DNF I had for this month. So I had bought the first 5 books of this series off Pango when I was buying from a shop, and they were all there and bundled very, very cheaply. This was something that had been floating in my Goodreads and my Storygraph recommendations for years that I wanted to try, and I kind of took a risk on it, and I tried this, like I said, on both audio and physically, and it just didn't work for me. The physical was like something that I didn't think the writing style was working great, and I didn't love the characters, but then when I tried the audio to make it go a little bit faster, the male love interest's like main character's voice was not it. Like, I was like, absolutely not, this is not gonna work. So I had to like completely give up on it. It's a steampunk historical like Victorian romance with vampires, I think, so there was a lot of things here that I could have liked, but just overall it was not for me. So that is everything I want to talk about for the month of January. If you have any thoughts or feelings or want to chat with me about any of the books that I talked about today, please let me know down below. You can also hit the like button while you're down there, but if you don't have anything to say or you're not feeling chatty, you can leave me a bird emoji of any variety, because there were a lot of birds in books that I read this month and on covers and such, so feels relevant. That is it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!